Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, the only podcast for dance studio owners, where each week we bring you business growth strategies to help you increase your profits, impact the lives of more students, while ensuring you get back some time to have a little life outside of the studio. It's time for you to become the go-to studio in your area. Now, here's your host, founder of the Dance Studio Owners Association, Clint Salter.
What's up, studio owners? It's Clint, and I'm so excited for today's podcast episode. I've got Jennifer Custer-Weeks on the call, on the interview. She's the founder of the hugely successful early childhood dance program, Tutu School. Now, Genevieve was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, and took part in her first dance productions in the middle of her parents' living room. Fast forward to 2006, where Genevieve, in the midst of a professional ballet career, decided to open her own boutique school where she could celebrate and nurture everything that she loved most about ballet. Today, Tutu School franchises specialize in creating storybook adventures in ballet for both boys and girls aged 18 months to 8 years. Now, you're going to love Genevieve's energy, her story, her natural progression to starting Tutu School, and I'm so privileged and feel so happy to be able to bring her to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. You are going to love, and I know I say that every week, but you're going to love this interview with Genevieve and really identify with so many of the things that she goes through. During our interview, we talk about how she started her business, the struggles that she's gone through, the challenges she's gone through as she scaled her business as well, and the things she's learned along the way. Enjoy this one, and I'll see you again next week. Bye for now. Welcome, Genevieve. So great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Now, I'd love for us to start by you telling our audience, Genevieve, a bit about what you do today in your business, Tutu School, that really shares your passion for ballet with your franchisees, your teachers, and your students.
Yeah, no, well, you sort of started hitting on it. We specialize in dance education for very young dancers. So starting at 18 months and going all the way up to 8 years old. So we really focus specifically on, what's traditionally been known as pre-ballet, but even starting a little bit younger, even starting with the toddler age group. And we only do ballet-based creative movement. So we're specifically influenced by ballet. And we just focus on that one thing, pre-ballet education for students under the age of 8. And I opened my first Tutu School 8 years ago. A year and a half later, I decided to open a second location. And then 2 years ago, we opened our first franchise location. And as of last month, we just sold our 16th location. So we've really grown. Yeah, we've grown quite quickly since deciding to franchise. So now what's great is that my life is made up with, kind of getting to spread the mission of Tutu School on a lot of different levels. I'm still teaching, so I'm still in the studio at least once a week where I get to work with my own students directly. I train my own teachers for the 2 locations that I still own, and then I'm training teachers for other locations and also helping other Tutu School owners open and manage their own schools. So I get to be involved on a lot of levels, which is fun and challenging and exciting.
And everything, every day. I'm sure you go through that roller coaster every day of feeling fun, excited, challenged, frustrated. Yes. That's like a day, right?
Yeah, exactly. All of the above every single day. Exactly.
I love that. I want to ask you, Genevieve, 18 months, so many of our program members and association members want to try and introduce a program for that 18-month age group, but so many of them struggle because it is young. They are very young at 18 months still. What have you put in place to really combat against that? And what have you found works really well for that age group?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think one of the reasons why I opened Tutu School in the first place was that I saw from a business perspective that was a real gap in the market, that dance education hadn't quite caught up to the trend in kids' activities in general, which was to start offering toddler classes. So in a lot of other spaces, whether it was, gymnastics programs or soccer programs, toddler classes that were, mommy and me or parent and me classes were being offered, but dance hadn't really caught up to that. And I didn't understand why, because I think that there's so much that we can do with that age group. I think the reason why it's often intimidating is because, as you know, so many of us studio owners and dance owners are former dancers ourselves. And we kind of come at it from, thinking about traditional dance education and have this image of needing to have a very disciplined dance class structure that we're going to be trying to fit 18-month-olds into, as opposed to approaching it from the other end, which is, okay, how do we meet them developmentally where they're at? And with the sole purpose really of just getting them in a room with music and movement and just having it be an enriching and nurturing experience that's their, for many of them, their first experience with any kind of dance or movement, and certainly with ballet. So we really approach it from that level, where we say there's no right or wrong way to take the class. However a caregiver needs to help their child participate in the class, and there's a huge range. So you'll see some kids that are basically taking the class pretty independently before 2 years old, and then other kids where they really, their parents might be holding them for a lot of it, or their caregiver, their nanny, or their grandparent, but they're still getting something out of it because they're in a room, learning social skills with other students. They're getting to hear all of these different types of movement. They're experimenting already with moving different ways. They're working on motor skill development, because we work in other things like rhythmic awareness and practicing counting and a little bit of instrument playing. They're developing all of these other skills at the same time that they're having this early introduction, but we're really careful to meet them where they're at developmentally, as opposed to focusing on trying to make an 18-month-old take a ballet class perfectly, which of course would never work.
Totally. Now, the other thing you said just before is that, your journey to opening a second studio, and a lot of our studio owners who are listening may be toying with the idea of like, well, my first studio is going pretty okay, and maybe I should open a second studio. I'd love you to talk about both sides of the coin. What were those things that you made sure you had in place before you started the second studio? And looking back on that, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question, because I honestly think that I learned so many things in preparing to franchise and in preparing to figure out how we were going to systemize things and replicate a tutu school for anyone, anywhere, that I wish I'd known before we'd opened that second school. I sort of realized retroactively after I tried to duplicate one, okay, wow, we really need to, go back to ground zero and figure out what makes a tutu school, and how do we replicate this, and how do we scale it so that we can do this on a big level. And so one of the things I like to tell people in any business now, but especially, dance school owners, if you have any plans to expand, even if you just think that you might, it doesn't have to be that you're saying, I'm doing this in 6 months to a year or even 6 years, even if it's just in the back of your mind that at some point you might want to open up another location, keep that in mind for every single decision you make. Because even the smallest things and even the smallest systems and processes can be affected by just that knowledge that, hey, at some point I might want to replicate this. So whether it's the way that you're training your teachers, whether it's, the software that you've chosen to use, or how you're tracking class attendance and registration, I think that those things really are impacted. But, obviously by how many locations you have, and you can really save yourself a ton of trouble down the line if you have already had that in the back of your mind. So you've already started thinking about, how would we do this? How would we operate this? How would we run our recital and our concert if we had more than one location? And so if I could do one thing differently, it would just be that I would have really, even with the first one, I would have started building out that first school with the idea in mind that at some point I was going to want to scale it and have additional locations.
I love that you said that, because it's an important message that we talk about a lot on the podcast and inside our programs is you can't have all the information inside of your head. Like, you cannot be just like the keeper of everything that happens in your studio. And a lot of us are. I know I was in my studio for the first couple of years, is that everyone would come to me because I was the only one that knew everything, because nothing had been systemized or put into processes or documented. How did you approach when you got that and you were like, okay, you know what, we need some systems if we want to scale, so that, our enrollment process is exactly the same in all of our different sites, that our teacher training is the same. How did you first, I guess, tackle that idea, and what were the tactics, I guess, the steps that you followed to really start putting down on paper, on the computer, what your systems were?
Yeah, absolutely. So we divided it up into sections. So we really looked at, we took one chunk of the business at a time. So first we would start with, you could start anywhere, but there's, you can look at the sort of superficial things. You can look at, okay, from a branding standpoint, what makes our space, in the franchise industry, they call it your trade dress. What makes our space look like our school? What makes it look like a tutu school? What do we need to have? What fixtures, what furniture, what equipment in any tutu school, A, for it to operate, but B, for it to look like a tutu school and to be branded. And so, we were compiling that so that there's a really easy checklist for here are the things that we need to get. Here are the vendors we can even get them from to build out a school. Then, probably the biggest logistical chunk are your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month operations. What are our systems for registration? What are our systems for handling everything from, cancellations to makeups? How do we keep ourselves organized on a regular basis? And so really sitting down and looking at everything we do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year basis and writing it all down in a really clear, concise, streamlined way. And then the last sort of piece of it that is probably really the most important is because it's what your business is built on is our programs. So our curriculum, first of all, really making sure that curriculum was not only written down, but really well thought out, that it was something that, we'd really clearly delineated all the divisions in our school, all the levels, what the class objectives would be for each level, and then what the class content would look like. And then as a part of that too, what does it take to train a teacher, and really systemizing, okay, they're going to observe X number of classes. They're going to assist in X number of classes. They're going to co-teach for X number of classes before they ever teach a class all on their own. In addition to some sit-down training and some other time with materials that we pulled together, like training films and things like that. And then also, off of that other chunk for the programs, we do offer a tutu camp summer day camp program, and we also have birthday parties. So we needed to look, just even for those programs, it was systemizing and putting down on paper what goes into setting up a birthday party, what are each of the packages, what are all the materials and inventory we need to keep in stock for each of those, how do we train staff for birthday parties. So it took us a long time, as you can imagine. And that's one of the reasons why I do wish that, I think it's such a daunting thing when you look at it that way, like, okay, let's go back and do this for everything. I wish I could go back in time to before we'd even made the decision to franchise and just had started doing that from the beginning. Because I think then you can, those things are always evolving, and then you can just kind of keep working with them and updating them as they evolve, as opposed to having to go back and do it all from scratch.
I love how deeply you dived into all of that. And obviously for everyone listening, hearing from what Genevieve just said, it's crucial, especially, if you want to open multiple sites, or if you're even thinking of franchising, even if you've just got one studio, you need to systemize so that you can remove yourself from the day-to-day and bring people into the business that can, run the business so that you can work on it. I guess one thing that came up for me then, Genevieve, was the fact that you truly are now the CEO of your business of Tutu School. You are the main woman, but I'm assuming that there was a day where you were teaching, back in the early days, every class. You were in the studio, you were sending out the invoices at, 12 a.m. in the morning. What were some of the shifts that you had to make, from a business standpoint for you to be able to grow the business? What were maybe a couple of key learnings that you were like, you know what, I need to do that, or I have to do that for you to actually get to the next level?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. And I feel like I've heard you talk about that a lot on the podcast too. I think that the trickiest thing, I think probably for all business owners, but maybe even especially for dance school owners, because I think a lot of us have a very specific personality as former dancers. It's so hard to let go of control, and if you of anything. But sometimes it's even remarkable how difficult it is for us to let go of control of things that are pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. And the only way you can grow is if you do. So I've definitely learned to delegate. It's something I'm still working on, but I read a book this year that I'm pretty obsessed with. It's called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. Have you read that?
Yes, I certainly have.
The author's name is, I think, Greg McEwen. And in it, he spends all this time talking about finding your greatest point of contribution. And so now I really do try and kind of use that as my acid test for, okay, am I spending my time on something that is my greatest point of contribution now that my role really is not just, running my own locations, and I have a wonderful school coordinator who directs those schools now, but it's helping other people open and operate their own locations. So, for example, we've had a bookkeeper for a long time, but it would not be a good use of my time to be spending my time on payroll. That's something that I can delegate to somebody else, whereas it would be a much better use of my time to be refining our curriculum and looking at our process for training teachers and making sure that the quality of a client's experience in our classes is going to be so high that they're not going to want to go anywhere else. Once you look at everything sort of through that lens of, is this where I can be making the greatest contribution? And not only that, but where everyone in your organization, as you grow, looking at, okay, am I really using everyone to the best of their abilities? Do I have somebody who might be an excellent teacher trainer? Is she instead spending all of her time returning phone calls and emails when maybe somebody else in the organization could be doing that? So it's kind of something I'm trying to constantly look at and just make sure that everybody around me is being used in a way and I'm facilitating them being able to work at their highest point of contribution, as well as making sure I am, because it is, especially when I started being the person who taught all the classes, did all of the admin, did everything. It's really hard to let go of that stuff. And sometimes I still get surprised when I catch myself doing something where I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? This is something that I easily could have delegated. I have nobody to blame except for myself that, the bigger projects on my list aren't getting crossed off today because instead I'm doing this.
Yeah. The great thing there though, is you've got the awareness to pick yourself up on it.
Right. I'm trying.
Yeah. We always are. I think that never really stops, but it becomes less and less because we are working more on than in. Right. You mentioned curriculum before, and I'm a big believer that curriculum is key. What are some of the benefits, do you believe, that having a stable, proven curriculum in place can do for a studio?
I think it's so important. I know, speaking specifically to what we do at Tutu School, it's very important because I think it's really easy for people to look at the pre-ballet side of things or the creative movement side of things when they're looking at preschool dance programs and be sort of dismissive about it and say, well, they're not really doing real dancing yet, so who needs a curriculum? Give them some fun games and call it a day.
Yeah, we'll make it up, essentially.
Exactly. Or what I've seen on the other side is that, more advanced dancers or teachers who haven't really worked with very young children before basically end up just sort of watering down a more advanced program. And, on either end, there's a real missed opportunity in the best sort of scenario and some danger in the worst case scenario. So I think it's so important for us to have a really, thoughtful curriculum that pays attention to the fact that, look, at the heart of what we do, our mission is an enriching introduction to ballet. That's what we want to offer people, is this just incredibly magical experience for children that are first, meeting ballet and hopefully falling in love with it. So that's our primary goal. But then we also understand that up until the age of 8, when, more serious discipline study would start between the ages of 6 to 8, we want to start layering in a great technical foundation so that if they want to study more seriously after that, they have a wonderful, clean, solid technical base, but hopefully have not picked up the bad habits that creep in when serious study starts too soon or isn't well thought out. When dancers start doing too much work in rotation when they're too young, when they really shouldn't be working in turnout. You see that a lot in programs where, people are well-meaning, but maybe no one has sat down and said, okay, what are our class objectives for our 3 and 4-year-old division, our 4 and 5-year-old division, on up. So I think it's to me, it's really important because it's one of the benchmarks that demonstrates the quality of our program. But I also think it's important because I feel such a responsibility to both ends of that mission, which is one, really fostering a love of ballet. And so making sure that the program stays incredibly fun because it's, well thought out in the way that it's hopefully engaging kids, but also because I feel such a responsibility as a retired ballet dancer to make sure that the technique that they are getting is really age appropriate, really developmentally appropriate, and is going to serve them well if they want to study seriously later on.
Yeah. Completely agree with you there. And thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for our audience to really hear that message, especially around the progression. I also am a big believer in that it definitely helps with retention as well. When there's something that's well thought out, that means, having a great program, a great curriculum is important, but then you need fantastic teachers to teach it and engage the students in each and every class. What's your process around finding the right types of teachers for tutu schools?
It's so interesting now too, because I've always felt this way for my, the 2 locations that I own, but now that I help, other individuals start their own schools and then, sort of guide them through the hiring process and the training of their own teachers. It's so interesting because there isn't a perfect formula for finding teachers for this specific age group. And I'll tell you why. It's because you have to be a little bit crazy. I mean, herding a group of 3-year-olds is challenging at best, really, really rewarding also. But it does take, it takes a special sort of, not tangible level of magic and definitely a little bit of sweet craziness too. And so what we found is that, tutu school on our faculty, we will have sometimes teachers who are professional dancers. They're still actually dancing and performing and they're teaching in their spare time. And then we'll have other teachers that dance seriously growing up, but maybe are now, education majors in school or have significant nanny experience, and have left the dance world because the group of dancers that we're working with are so young, and also because our curriculum is so clearly laid out, there's really a broad range of candidate that will work in terms of needing them to be at the proper technical level, but that sort of intangible element that it can be a lot harder to find is just that they are fantastic with children, that they're engaging with children, that they can stay really cool and calm under pressure when they're trying to keep a room full of 3-year-olds engaged and working together in a way that's at least organized and magical chaos. And so what we've really found is that at the end of the day, you can do lots of interviewing, you can look at lots of resumes, you have to get them in a room with your age group and you have to watch them. So we will, we do lots of interviewing. We certainly look at everyone's background and we can pick out elements that we think might be helpful. And we certainly also look for a willingness to be trained in our curriculum. That's certainly important. But at the end of the day, we do a pretty long probationary period where teachers assist and co-teach with us so that we can see them interacting one-on-one alongside our current faculty and really make sure that they're going to be a great fit.
Yeah, perfect. I love that kind of team teaching strategy is so important. And and I would say to everyone listening, that's not just with your preschool kind of, your young kids. That's with any teacher that comes into your studio, whether they're teaching the seniors or, the little ones. The revenue stream. So you talked about birthday parties, and for all of those that have listened before, that I love additional revenue streams, building them inside of our studio. How did you go about, once you kind of had the core curriculum, how did you go about then introducing different aspects, different revenue streams into the business model? Yeah,
we actually started with birthday parties right off the bat. And I think it was a really key revenue stream to launch with because, so I certainly always, when our franchise locations are opening up, we'll tell them, hold off on camp if you need to, don't do a recital or a concert your first year if you're not ready. We'll say, put those revenue streams on the back burner until your core program of classes is going. But we always tell them to launch with parties and as well as their classes. And the reason is because it's such a great marketing tool for your school. It's a relatively easy thing to do when your studio is not in use anyway. It's sitting there. We only do them usually on weekend afternoons when we're not holding classes. And then you're getting in a group of, usually at least a dozen students or, guests, many of whom have never heard of your school before, but are there because a friend has or has selected this for their party. They all leave with a party favor that includes a tutu school postcard that they're going to take home and see that they can come have a free trial class with us. A lot of them are already, leaving the party, begging their parents to come back and dance some more. Sometimes they're a little disappointed when they find out there aren't cupcakes at every class, but it's just, it's just great marketing. So, it's pretty hard to find another way where you're going to get at least a dozen kids in the door a pop. So I think it's a great thing to start. And really, I think that people are intimidated by them, but they're not that hard to launch, and I think with those, the one thing I learned pretty quickly was that you can offer a wonderful, beautiful, even detailed birthday party package, but you do want to make sure that that's definitely an area where you want to pay attention to how you plan to scale it going forward. If it's something, initially you feel like you could, there's almost nothing you wouldn't offer or include in a package. I think it's important to look at it through the lens of, what are you going to be able to do long term if you start booking these every weekend, on Saturday and Sunday? How would you handle the setup with your staff once you have staff? And how are you going to make it something that you can really maintain and something that you can do long term and have be successful for you? Because it's easy initially to sort of get carried away and try and make every party a Pinterest worthy party, and you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that obviously really represents your brand beautifully, but is something that you can sustain.
Yeah, exactly. Let's. I'd love to know. So that's one really great strategy of bringing people through the door that are potential, new customers. So new students, new parents. How else do you get in front of this market to bring into your studios and your franchisee studios?
Yeah. Well, one of the wonderful things about working with this age group, but I'm sure it's true for other dance schools as well, is that parent communities tend to be so tightly knit. So we really, anytime we go into a new community, we just automatically, we look for, where are parents congregating? What are the organizations that they are participating in? We try and find out what are the local mothers groups, what schools would most of our target audience be at? What preschool programs are they participating in? What events take place that our target clients are going to be at, and we just sort of blanket those areas. So, a lot of times we'll offer play dates that are basically our birthday party package, but without a birthday child, where it's the same sort of idea that we're, offering a school or a play group or a mother's group can have a dozen or so kids come in and spend an hour and a half in the studio and do a little dancing and have a little craft time and have some cupcakes before they go home. And it's a pretty low cost way to, again, get a whole group of students in the door, potential students. And you might not sign all of those students up on the spot, but it's likely that you'll schedule trial classes for a couple. And then, in this day and age of social media, that every parent there is taking a picture of their child in their tutu and posting it online and tagging the fact that they were at tutu school. Their friends are seeing it and saying, oh, I saw so-and-so was at ballet. Where were they? And, word spread. So we really try and plant all those seeds. The great thing about being in the kids' activities space is so much of our best advertising really is word of mouth from one parent to the next. So when you're launching, you just have to make sure that you're planting the seeds in the proper places and then really dutifully tending to them. And usually a few months in, you really just see that you'll be shocked by the number of people you're talking to who say, oh, tutu school. No, I've heard of that. Yeah. And it's just, you want to touch them 1 to 2 to 3 times at least, whether it's that they picked up a postcard at their kid's story time, and then they saw their friend post a picture on Facebook, and then they happened to be walking by, and that was the time that they said, no, I'm coming in to sign up for a trial class, but if you make sure that you're just constantly getting yourself in front of the places where parents in your community are, you're going to start seeing a return on that.
Totally. I think building those long-term relationships as well is really important with those groups. So I see a lot of people go into the groups, whether it's online or offline, and say, hi, can I promote my, classes? Can I give you some flyers? I mean, it's really not about that. People want to feel connected. So it's about giving value first before you ask for something.
Absolutely. No, we see that. And there's a local mothers group here in San Francisco that I really think was largely responsible for my launch. And I have an email in my inbox today asking if they can schedule some demo classes for their group, because we've, maintained and nurtured that relationship this whole time.
Mm-hmm. So important. Now, one thing that comes up a lot in our association is, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, and I'm running this business. Like, how do I make it all work? So I would love to get I'd love to get your approach, Genevieve, and how you ensure that you can be present in each of those moments and give as much as you possibly can without you completely feeling depleted and overwhelmed.
Yeah, no, it's such a challenge. And, I try and apply I had a whole idea from, essentialism, the idea of where can I make my greatest point of contribution to my personal life too. It's something I'm always working on, but I have to say too, I have a 7-year-old boy, he's turning 7 on Monday. And then I have 2-year-old twins, all boys. So lots of energy in my house, lots of craziness. And it's really challenging. One of the reasons why I built Tuju School out the way that I did, and one of the reasons, one of the things I had in mind as I was really systemizing everything and figuring out how this business was going to operate as we continue to scale it and sell it to other people to run for themselves, was that I really wanted the flexibility to be a working mother, a mother who worked outside the home, but also, I do a lot of work from home, but work in addition to being a stay-at-home mom. But that I also really wanted to be able to be around and to be present with my kids for a lot of the things that I knew I would miss if I had a traditional job. So I really built Tuju School in a way where I can do so much of my work remotely, even if I'm doing administrative work for the locations I currently own. And that's true of all of our franchise owners. A lot of them spend very little time in the studio itself, unless there's a reason for them to be there or they're teaching classes, because we've systemized things in such a way where they can do a lot of work remotely, unless they need to be there for a specific class, or they're teaching a class, or they're monitoring one of their teachers. They all definitely make sure they're very present at their schools, but they can really have a lot of flexibility, because a number of them are moms, to be home with their kids when they need to be. And that's invaluable. With that, it can certainly be tricky to juggle all of it. And so I've really started trying to focus on the idea more of, I resent a little bit this idea of work-life balance as this, other thing that we all have to achieve.
Yeah.
Because I think it's more about cycles. I think that it's more about seasons, which is an idea I can really relate to as a dancer, and that when things get crazy and they just seem insane, they're not going to stay that way forever. And I heard someone say the other day, we're all trying to have it all. And it's not that you can't have it all, but you can't have it all every day. So, like yesterday I had a crazy work day and I was away almost all day and barely saw my kids. But today I had one teacher I was auditing, and then I just took all 3 of them to the zoo. And I just got back right before doing this interview with you. So I think that, that sense of perspective, getting over the idea of like, okay, in every single day, I need to divide my day up into thirds and have, work and family time and then me time is just, is ridiculous. But the idea that, in any given week, you might even have multiple seasons that you're cycling through. But certainly in a year, there are going to be periods that are going to, just feel a little bit crazier on the work front or on the personal life front. And you're just going to kind of constantly be working to counterbalance that until you cycle into a new season, has helped me stay a little bit more sane and a little bit calmer through it all.
Perfect. I totally agree. And, also work that way. I think the funny thing really though, when we talk about it, is that I think it comes back to systems. The reason you can go to the zoo for a day and that you can kind of go over here and do that and take the time off is because you've really worked hard on putting systems in place so that the businesses can run without you, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. You have to have that in place.
Yeah, I think this is where our studio owners get stuck, is that because the systems might be missing or not fully there, that their staff have to call them and have to email them, and because no one really knows what's going on unless the studio owner is there. So I just wanted to point that out, because I it's something that we did in our studio that I continue to do in our businesses, and it sounds like you're very passionate about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's so true. And I think it goes back to that same thought process about, okay, when you're thinking about how you might eventually want to scale your business and trying to factor in where you might want to grow your business into even the little decisions you make in each day, looking at the work you do every day and thinking about, okay, so what happens if I'm not here for this? What happens if I decide to take a vacation, or I want a maternity leave or whatever? Or what happens if I just am growing my business so I'm working on a second location? Who would do this? And how do I set set up a system and really facilitate somebody else being able to do this or this to operate without me. I mean, it's also amazing once you look at streamlining your business, how many things you can find that maybe you don't need somebody to be doing. I mean, we always want to make sure that our clients feel incredibly taken care of. So we never would ever want to skimp or streamline our way out of excellent customer service. But I think any business, when you really start looking at systemizing it and trying to make it more efficient, you can find tons of things where you say, wait, why were we doing it this way? And why are we spending time on this? And that's invaluable.
Totally. Now I want to wrap up, Genevieve. So I'd love to hear from you. What are your top 3 tips for running a successful dance studio?
So, I mean, I think they would be my top 3 tips for probably any business, but I think they apply especially to a dance studio. I think, first of all, knowing your formula for finding your highest point of contribution, and then really making sure you're applying that to everyone around you as well, so that all the people in your organization are contributing in their best possible way as well. I just think that's so huge, and you can't overstate that. If you don't have everyone, really being encouraged to do the best that they possibly can, and also if you're not facilitating them contributing at their highest point of contribution, then you're just wasting resources in terms of your own output, but also the people around you. I think another thing that I've tried to focus on is getting back to that more essentialist lifestyle, is the idea of not always saying yes, and I'm trying to say no more often. But as in sort of an offshoot of that, what's happened is that I've just gotten more in touch with why I do the things that I do. And I think, people talk a lot now about knowing your why. And I think it's great. I love that the idea of getting in touch with your why is becoming so popular. I love knowing it as far as your just sort of larger core goals and mission for big things like your career and your business and what's at the root of your family and your personal life. But I'm even trying to apply knowing all of my whys to just the little things that I'm doing. If I have trouble, saying no to things, which I do, then I at least want to know why I'm saying yes. So if I'm taking on additional volunteer work, or if I'm taking meetings that there isn't, a clear immediate reason why it's going to be a beneficial connection or, a good thing for the business, I want to be really clear about why I'm doing it. And then I know that's going to mean that, I'm just being a lot more thoughtful about how I'm spending my time and my resources, which is going to tie into that first one, which is of course making sure that I can make my highest point of contribution. So the first 2 are formula for finding your highest point of contribution, and then knowing your whys. And then my third one, it does really tie into dance, which is that I only kind of realized after I'd retired what great training being a professional dancer was for being in business. Because, all dancers know that there's this crazy balance that you have of balancing preparation with risk taking. We spend probably more time than the rest of the world just in daily pursuit of, disciplined hours of rehearsal, practice, preparation. But at the end of the day, there's still that, I call it the step on the stage moment, where you have to just trust that all the training and the preparation is there, and you have to step on the stage and just make magic happen. And I never realized until after I'd retired that, not everyone gets to have years of practicing that moment, that step on the stage moment where you just have to go for it. And to really sort of play with the balance of how much preparation is enough, and okay, when do I transition into now I'm taking the risk, now I'm stepping on the stage and I'm just going for it. So my third one would definitely be, that step on the stage moment, really defining those step on the stage moments for yourself. For me, it was definitely just deciding to open the first tutu school, and then the leap to open the second one, and then deciding to franchise. And now every time I decide to go forward with a new tutu school owner who's applied to have their own franchise, I feel like, it's another step on the stage moment for them and for me as well. And I'm so grateful that I had that background and that all that practice, and all of those years as a dancer, so that I can translate that into business too.
I love that. Your step on the stage moment. I think that's so profound and so relevant for all of our studio owners and for anyone really that is listening to this interview with you, is that, we do take a lot of risks and we need to calculated risks as studio owners, as business owners. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Genevieve, people are probably listening to this saying, I want more information on Genevieve, and how can I find out more about Tutu School? Where should they go to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place would be tutuschool.com. So tutuschool.com. And you can find out information on all of our current locations there. There are a few more that are in the works and opening, so stay tuned. And there's also a tab there for information on franchise opportunities.
Fantastic. Well, I've had such a great time, and I could talk to you for hours. So I want to thank you for giving so much to our audience today and sharing what you've learned over the last many years, starting your studio, opening a second location, and then franchising. So thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. For all the resource links from the show and to receive access to our free dance studio growth training, make sure you visit transformmydancestudio.com.